How's it going, everyone? It's Lumity here, and today we're going to be talking about a game for the Sega Genesis. Today, we are talking about Tiny Toon's Buster's Hidden Treasure, a game made by Konami. Back in the day, Konami made quite a few different types of games other than what you see them making these days. It seems like these days they don't really do a whole lot other than make, things like Metal Gear Solid, and I don't know what else they make. Yu-Gi-Oh! I think they still make Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's about it. But back in the day, they used to make a ton of different games for tons of different licenses, and one of those games happened to be Tiny Toons, and they did a fantastic job with this game. This game is bright, it's colorful, the characters look so great, the sprites look just like how they should. The level design is pretty well designed, at least for the first 3/4 of this game. The difficulty is just right. It's not too difficult. It's I would say it's actually on the easier side for the first half of this game, and then once you get to the second half, it really cranks up the difficulty. But for the first half of the game, it's pretty easy. And this game does use a code system, so whenever you beat a level, it will give you a code so you can get back to where you were. And I believe if you run out of lives, it also gives you a code to get back to the same level that you were on. And this game does have continues as well, so if you run out of lives, you can always use a continue, and you'll get 2 or 3 lives back, and it'll let you play the game some more. So that's always a good thing. I prefer it when video games have continues because I'm bad at video games. But I like this game a lot. It looks great. It has a lot of personality to it. You run around as Buster the entire game. You run through a few different levels collecting a bunch of different stuff. There's some portraits you can collect. There's carrots that you go and you collect and stuff like that. And the more carrots you collect, the more points you get in the level. And when you get a certain amount of points at the end of the level, it will give you extra lives that you will probably need for the later levels, because the later levels definitely do get a little bit difficult. But the first few levels are pretty easy. They're pretty fun. The actual boss fights that are in this game, I actually really like. I think they're all really well designed for the most part. They're very simple. I like them, though. They're basically just jump on the enemy's head 5 times, and if you jump on the enemy's head 5 times, then you basically beat the boss fight. And a lot of the boss fight usually revolves around jumping on the same evil villain's head 5 times, but basically the whole kind of I guess you could say the gimmick of this game is that this evil villain is controlling each one of Buster's friends using a mind control helmet. So each one of these controlled friends is attacking you while you're trying to jump on the head of the person controlling them. And I think that's a kind of an interesting idea. It's an interesting way to do it. And the person that's controlling them can hurt you as well, just by touching you. So if you touch them by accident, they can actually hurt you. And I've gotten killed a few times just by accidentally running into the villain. So that's something you got to watch out for. For the most part, the controls are pretty good. There's not a whole lot to really worry about in this game. I mainly just use literally the jump button and the running button. That's pretty much it. I know that there's a special ability that you can use as well, but I honestly never used it throughout the entire game. I always kind of forgot that I could. I would just completely ignore it. But for the most part, you can take out the majority of the enemies just by jumping on top of their head. And the one problem I do have is that the hitboxes aren't very good for the enemies. So sometimes, even though it will look like you jump on their head, if you're just slightly off, it will actually do damage to you instead. And that happened to me a few times, and I wasn't very happy about that. I was kind of just really? I need those hearts for some of these platforming, parts, because there's a lot of, hazards and stuff, like spikes, and there's lava and everything else on some of these levels, and I really need those hearts, so, jumping on the enemy head and me taking damage instead of the enemy, it's a little bit frustrating. So that is something to keep in mind. That probably will happen to you, since it happened to me quite a few times during my playthrough of this game. But still, I don't think it's a big enough problem to, really gripe at the game too much. It's just irritating when it happens every now and then. But for the most part, the enemies are pretty well designed. I like the way that a lot of them look. There's a lot of different enemies in this game. There's actually one where you go onto this pirate ship, and there's some ghosts flying around, and they kind of just spawn up around you, and I think that's a really cool level. There's some armor that's chasing you and stuff like that. It kind of reminded me of the Castlevania armor and stuff like that, so that was pretty cool. And there's just a lot of good enemies in this game, and I really like pretty much everything about this game until you get towards the end of the game. Actually, once you get to that pirate ship level, even though I think it's a cool designed level, that's kind of when the game actually does start to go downhill a little bit, just because the pirate ship has this really, they did this really odd decision. For the most part, the boss fights are separate levels from the regular levels, but on that one specifically, they decided to go ahead and put the boss fight at the end of the level. And the boss fight is one of the most difficult ones in the game, actually, so I don't really like that decision. That wasn't the best decision, but it is what it is. It's the only level quite like that, and once you play through it, you don't have to worry about it. And then you have a few more just kind of regular levels that aren't too bad. They can be somewhat frustrating just because there's so many like spikes that can hit you and literally kill you in one hit. You're supposed to have 3 hearts, but the spikes can take you out in one hit, so that kind of sucks, but is what it is. But for the most part, the levels after that are okay until you get to like the final 3 or 4. Because the final 3 or 4, for some reason, they decided to make it so you can still use a passcode to get back to whatever level you were at. But like, let's say that, you start off at, the first level in this last section, and you get all the way to level 3. Well, for some reason, in this last section of the game, if you die at the 3rd level, it will put you back at level 1 when you use a continue of that particular section. And I don't really understand why they decided to do that, because it doesn't do that for the rest of this game. So that was just a really odd decision. I don't know why they did that. I mean, they give you the password to get back to the level anyway, so why not just put you back on the level? I don't get that. That was such a weird decision, but it is what it is. For the most part, I like this game. The last boss fight, last boss fight actually isn't very difficult. The hardest part about it is before you actually do the boss fight, you have to get away from this like girl who's trying to grab you and basically cuddle you to death, and she can like one hit kill you, so you have to be very careful about that, and it's a pain in the butt to get away from her. So yeah, that is more difficult than the actual final boss himself. So, but overall, I still like this game a lot. Yes, the later levels are a little bit difficult, but the beginning levels are really charming and really good. And I've played this game quite a bit. This is the first time I actually played it through all the way to completion, but of course, now that I'm using the Retron 5, I was able to do that and use save states, so it made it a lot easier to do that. But this is the first time I played it all the way through to completion, and I definitely will say I like the early levels a lot, and then the second half of this game, not so much. But I still think that this game's worth it. It's one of the best looking games on the Genesis. It's one of the, I think, one of the smoothest playing games. It plays great. Everything's really responsive in it. I don't really have too many problems with that. And overall, it's just a really cool game. It does feel like sometimes it wants to be a little bit like Sonic, just because there's like, once you start gaining momentum, your feet start spinning, you start running really fast. But just like in regular Sonic, I feel like while it wants you to run fast, there's always something to stop you from going full speed and really going as fast as you can towards the end of the level. There's always something that stops you, so you can't actually go full speed. But overall, it is what it is. For some reason, these games back on the Sega Genesis wanted you to go really fast, but then put things in your way so you couldn't go fast. So I don't really get that. But hey, either way, this is a good game. I really do like this game, despite its flaws towards the later half of the game. The beginning half of this game is so good, I still think it's worth it. It took me probably like 3-4 hours to beat. It took me a while. And again, that was using save states. So without using save states, it would probably take around like 5 hours, I'd say. Just because you have to put in the passcodes and everything to get back to where you were. So I basically just took out the middleman. but that's going to be it for this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe button down below. And I'll talk to you in the next video. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.